Yes, friends, in this lesson we're going to solve a few examples. Up until now, we've tried to see many examples and uses related to variables, operators, loops, decision structures, and string variables. But are there examples where we can use all of these together? What could they be? What can be done? Actually, I want to take a look at these a bit as well, friends. And in the meantime, we'll also touch on some topics related to using methods within strings. Now, let's start with a simple example. Let's say there's a user login on a website. And what do you need to be able to log in? You need a username and password. You get this from the user, and if the username and password are correct, you've logged in. If not, your username or password is incorrect. Let's try to set up a structure like please try again. Let's see how we'll do it. First, we need to start from what we know, friends. Let's do it like this. I'm going to make this very simple and straightforward. I don't want it to be too complicated. Here's how it'll go. Now, what will we get from the user? We'll ask them to know their username. So, I'm taking the system. This too. First the name. Then what will we get? System, then password. Of course, when we run this here, the screen will only display the output. So, there's nothing here where the user can enter any information.
As you can see on screen, there's only output. Our concern isn't output. It's about getting information from the user. There will be output, but let's get input from the user. How do we do that?
Let's do it like this. Let's say string. Let it be string username equals. What am I going to do? I say new scanner. I say system.input.nextLine. Sir, what is this? What does it do? Let's set up the logic here like this, please. Of course, there are some parameters here. I've mentioned these before. We'll come back to them later. We'll shoot separate videos about each of them. Think of this as a template here. It's a structure called scanner. What is this scanner here? It means to scan, right? It's a scanner. Why is it going to scan? Right. I write here what I want to scan. What is this? System. What is meant by system? When you think about this computer system, the operating system, what is at the core of the operating system? At its core, it has its own console command structure. There are inputs coming from outside to these. For example, you can input using the keyboard, mouse, or any other input device. And there are also outputs. You output something. Here, this is the part where you output to the system. So here, we're talking about the console. In other words, what I mean by system here is the console. When you say system out in the console you see on this screen, it outputs. That's what you're doing with print or print line. You're producing output. And the exact opposite of this is system.input, meaning the inputs made to the system, scan it. Scan what should I scan? Next line. So what will it scan as? What will it return to us as? It will take all the details from the current line where the input is made as a string. So this next line returns a result to us as a string. Of course, We'll talk about these again later, when we get to the network part. You'll understand these better. But let's think of it like this, logically. These are the inputs made to the system. So, we use it to take the inputs made from the keyboard and assign them to the stream PID variable. Let's think of it this way. Let's say string password. In the same way, this will also get information from the user like this. Guys, up to this point, have I received the username and password? Yes, I have. So what are we going to do now? Now, after getting the username and password, we need to check whether the user has logged in or not. How are we going to check? We'll do it like this. If username.sorry, if username equals, what should it be? For example, what should the username be? Let it be Muhammet. And at the same time, if password equals, what should it be? Let this be it too, guys. Now, what did we use here? Look, did we use variables? We did. Operator. Equals operator. That was assignment. Double equals. What was this? These were logical, right? Wasn't it so? Do you remember? Is this equal to that? Isn't that right? If this equals that, what was it? What were these? They were relations, right? These were relations. Relations. It was establishing the relationship between these two variables. So it's saying, is username equal to Muhammad? And what was this? This was the AND operator, right? This is AND. Logic gate, AND, or, not, right? They were used for these, if you remember. So, and or. So, what is it that we want to use here? What's the logic behind it? Teacher. So, like this, is the username equal to Muhammad? Is the password equal to this? So, why did we use this? Think of it this way, friends. You want to log into a website and you're going to enter your own username and password. Isn't that right? Everyone logs in with their username and password or email and password to verify themselves. So, here's the question. Let's do it like this, to understand it better. Let's say it's for a login process. Login. 4. Username and password, right? For example, what if it was like this? If the username was true, if it was correct, if the password was wrong, what's the result, guys? Think of it like this. Let's say you're logging into your own Gmail account. You entered your email address, but entered your password incorrectly. What happens when you try to log in? It fails. That's how it is. I don't know. Because you entered your password wrong. Okay, let's say I understood this problem. Let's say you entered your username incorrectly. So, false. For example, instead of writing Muhammad, you wrote Muhammed. You wrote it with a single M. But what about your password? Let's say your password is correct. What happens when you try to log in? It fails. Why? Well, there is no such username. Maybe that username doesn't even exist. Okay, let's say you did it like this. Hussein, your username is wrong. Your password is also wrong. Both your username and password are wrong. Again, it fails. Now, if your username is correct and your password is also correct, then it's successful. So, guys, the OR operator. That's what we're using here. The OR operator. What is it used to set up? We use it to determine if both conditions, both relationships, are true. Actually, if both are true, this part will happen. All right. What if they're not? If not, you'll give a warning. So here, the system will say, let me call it system error. The username or password is incorrect. Isn't that right? So here, all the failures in this cloud are either because the password is wrong, the username is wrong, or their hits are wrong. So since it's one of these three possibilities, we'll say the username or password is incorrect. Here, we'll say system accepted. Login successful. Result. This is the result, friends. Teacher, what if instead of doing it like this, you gave it in more detail? For example, wouldn't it be possible to say your username is wrong or your password is wrong? No, it wouldn't. Friends, you would be causing a major security vulnerability. I mean, you would be revealing whether the user is registered in that system or not. What do you mean? For example, let's say I'm logging into Company A, Hepsi Barada, and you don't know which email I used to register there. If you don't know, you can't try a password. But if you know for sure which email I used to register on which site, then you can do this. You do it like this, as if it's coming from Hepsi Barada. You can send me an email about a password change or password block error. So you average it out. I imitate all of them here. It's as if someone is logging in on your behalf and they're all here. Or it could be any other banking app. Meanwhile, I gave it very specific, a little bit. I will send you a link to any website and from there it will look like someone is stealing your account. I send a phishing email to the person saying please change your password or secure your account to recover it or protect it from the attack. Then they enter their information there and I access their account. That's how phishing works. Guys, why? Because of the ignorance of the person who wrote or set up that site, because of their lack of coding knowledge, because of security vulnerabilities, they can find out whether your email address is registered there or not. So someone, thinking they'll provide a better user experience here. When the user enters their information, if you say your name is incorrect or your password is incorrect, you know this. You know that the person is registered there. You can manipulate them based on that. That's why it's not right. In these kinds of situations, you should just say username or password is incorrect. You should proceed without specifying which one is wrong. Now let's run it and see. Let's enter it incorrectly. Guys, username is Ali. Password might be a big heart. 345678, I pressed enter, it said username or password incorrect. Is that correct? It's correct. Guys, this part is correct, but there's a problem here. Let's get to the problem. Here, I'll enter it correctly. This time I'll enter information correctly. Muhammed, right? Look, it says Muhammed here. Enter. Password. I'm pressing enter. It said username or password is incorrect. Teacher, how is that possible? Look, let me set a breakpoint here. Actually, let me set it here. The breakpoint. No, this spot won't work. I'll set it here. Now, are the details actually correct? Aren't they coming through? I wonder if there's a problem with the information. Muhammad. I typed this and pressed enter. Don't open that thing. Don't look at it. Don't open it. Let's move on. Muhammed. Look, friends, I'm telling you exactly as it is. Muhammed password with a capital letter, Iaxca12456, that's how you write it. So, the username too, it's correct. The username is correct. The password is also correct. Okay, then. Why do I end up with false when I move to the next step? Why did this end up as false? Is it because I wrote V? Maybe. No, this part is also false. Guys, look, it's false here, and it's false here. So, it's as if the username isn't Muhammad. It's acting like the password isn't this either. So, teacher, what's the problem then? Here's where you need to pay attention. Here, an important feature about strings comes up. Here, when you create a string variable, for example, when you define a string variable like Muhammad, what does it do, guys? It gets placed in memory, I mean in the heap, and it gets addressed. Good. In the same way, when you do something like this, when you read data with a scanner, this entire process happens in precisely the same way within the computer's memory. The addresses. Okay. Now, when you do this, username equals Muhammad. When you do that, the equality check performed here meticulously verifies if the memory addresses are indeed precisely equal, ensuring an exact match. So, is the address of username equal to the address of the string Muhammad? That's what it checks. Are they equal? Of course, they're not. The address of the string you get from the user with new scanner and the address where the string Muhammad is stored are different from each other. That's why, when you use equals equals, it checks if the addresses are the same. That's why, in this operation, this relation equality comes out as false. So, how do we solve it? Let's solve it. Look, inside the string, in other words, inside username. The equals method is used for this. Guys, what does equals mean? Does it mean are they equal? This equality here, guys, the equality here, the check here is only based on the values. Is performed. That's why the result comes out as false. So, if you have two string variables, the expressions inside them, these are objects and are located differently in memory. Like I said, these are arrays, so they're char arrays. Because they're char arrays, there's no way their addresses will be equal in terms of equality. Guys, they're defined as two different objects. But if you write it directly as a string, there's a concept called the string pool. Because of the string pool, equality is achieved. That's a completely different thing. We'll touch on that and talk about it later. But the problem here is caused by the addresses not matching each other. That's why you use username.equals here. In fact, it's even better to use equalsIgnoreCase. What does that mean? equalsIgnoreCase. In other words, it means don't worry about case sensitivity even if it's uppercase in one place and lowercase in another. Of course, you can't do something like that with passwords, guys. But you can do it with usernames. The uppercase and lowercase letter inequality, you don't have to worry about it. You can ignore it. But you can't do that with passwords. With passwords, you pay attention to uppercase, lowercase, special characters, everything. Let's see what happens when I run this. Here, I type Muhammed. It says login successful. As you can see, in this way, we've seen a slightly more complex structure. Guys, let's continue with our next lesson.